Be Smart viewers. Welcome back to another engaging episode of Manager's Mantra, where we connect with industry leaders who are shaping the future of business management. Today we have with us Hemang Upadhyay, Strategic Product Leader, LG Electronics North America. Hemang is a senior product management leader with over 16 years of experience driving large scale digital transformation and AI driven innovation across leading e commerce and technology organizations. He specializes in building and scaling enterprise platforms, including AI powered search, recommendation system, automation framework, and self service digital experiences that deliver measurable business impact. Without waiting further, let's jump right into this insightful discussion.
Hi, Hemang. A very good afternoon from India and a very warm welcome to this new session of Managers Mantra. We're very glad to have you with us today. And I'm sure that, the viewers will just love this session.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for having me today.
Okay, so Hemang, let's just start discussing the questions. The first question which I wanted to ask you is about artificial intelligence. Of course, we can't actually conclude any discussion without talking about AI. So that is the first question which I wanted to ask you today is, where is AI genuinely delivering measurable business value today? And where do you believe the industry is still ahead of reality?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that, we cannot have any conversation without having AI in our discussions. So that's, actually really a question that I often get asked a lot in my conversation as well. So the honest answer to that is, AI doing really well in some unglamorous places, if I call it, right? And let me give you an example what that means. Think about what happens when you are on an e-commerce website and a customer types something into the search bar, as in a running shoes for flat feet, for an example. So the old system that used to work is, doing a keyword match. So what it used to do is return anything with the word called running in it. And an AI powered search engine nowadays, what it does is system understand the intent of the user or the customer, right? And it understands this person has a specific medical condition or a need, and then it surfaces the right product in front of you. So the customer finds what they need in seconds and they buy it, right? They don't just return the product after that. And that's the success that we see, or that's the impact that we see with the AI. And that's called a measurable improvement in customer satisfaction, right? So there is a kind of a thing AI is genuinely delivering today is what I believe. So where AI is genuinely working, what I see is in customer experience, recommendation engine for products, intelligent search, self-service chatbot for the customers, right? And second is operation, supply chain forecasting, predictive maintenance in manufacturing, if I take that example, also fraud detection in financial services. So there are not experimental use cases, but there are production ready systems that are running right now at scale, and different companies are already using it. Now you also asked me an interesting question: where is the industry ahead of the reality, right? And that's more of the conversation where people get uncomfortable with, because there is a hype side of it as well. So I want to be honest where because I think the industry owes this answer very honestly, because there is a lot of excitement about AI replacing entire job function overnight, or AI just making fully autonomous business decisions without even zero human input. So that's still significantly ahead of what reality sits today, and not because the technology can't really get there, but it's really because the organizations are not structurally ready for it, right? If you look at different companies, the data is not clean enough in each of the company. The reason being that the process are not yet aligned, it is not governed properly, or the governance require more effort to stabilize those process, and the change management is not in place. So I sometimes compare this with the example of building a house. So everything, we get excited when we build a house, and we need fans, we need different doors and glass and so on, right? So similarly, if the foundation is not solid, none of this matters. And right now, many companies are still pouring that foundation, cleaning their data, integrating the system in the right way. They upskill their people, and simultaneously, they are trying to build that rooftop terrace, which is a tension where most of the AI projects, slow down or fall. So I just say that, it is my simple framework where AI delivers the measurable value, where outcomes are clearly defined, and where humans remain in the feedback loop. So the moment you lose that, the moment no one is checking the AI's output, that's the drift from value into the hope. And hope is not kind of a product strategy, right? So the industry get this right, like either you look at fintech or e-commerce or healthcare and logistic, right? All share one thing: data has always been a core to all of this to operate, and they already had the discipline to do that. So they pointed AI at existing rigorous process and amplified, right? So I think I would say data, clean data, and governance is what will make AI outcome better.
Thank you so much, Hemang. That was really insightful. So there is no iota of doubt that how helpful AI is going to be. Is already helping us in different businesses. Different outcomes. It has easing up. It is easing up processes which need redundant tasks and all of that. But then there is also a concern with the growing usage of AI. There is also a concern about trust, about transparency. So now AI, as it becomes more autonomous, how should young leaders, approach trust, transparency, and responsible innovation in product design?
Absolutely. So, I want to start this with a story so that I think that makes it very real, very quick to understand. A few months ago, I have seen that, there was a large financial institution who deployed their AI model to evaluate the loan application process, right? So by every standard technical benchmark, the model was excellent. It was accurate, it was fast and consistent. But what they discovered much later was that the model had quietly learn to use the zip code as a signal, right? What that means is many urban markets, zip code is a very closely monitored proxy for the race. So if the model was technically performing well, but morally, if we look at it, it was continuously, discriminating at the scale, and no one set out to build the discriminatory system, right? But they built it unintentionally, and they realized at the little later stage. So that story actually stayed with me because that failure wasn't in the algorithm that was built, right? It was in the question that team didn't ask while they were building or shipping that product. They might have asked, does it really work well? But the real question would be, who does this decision affect to, and who does this matter to, and is it fair to them, right? So if those are the things we encounter and take that into the consideration, the outcome would be much safer, I would say, than the accurate one. So when I think about trust and transparency in AI product design, the first conversation is not just technical, right? It's value based. What value it is providing? What kind of product leaders that we are having in our team? Who are building the AI products? What does your organization stand for? Before the model is even trained, before even the data is collected, what are these principles that will govern what you are building, right? And at the practical level, I organize this around three different pillars. One is explainability. What explainability means that when your AI system makes a decision that affect a person, like approving or denying something or recommending something, it should be able to offer at least a plain language reason rather than just an algorithm, right? So not necessarily the full mathematical derivation behind it, but human readable explanation, like what customer is actually looking for, why we are suggesting something because of the customer's past behavior. And that's the explainable model, right? Not just a black box score with no context behind it. So the second pillar I can talk about is like, proportional human oversight. So the level of autonomy you given a AI system that should match, reversibility of any decisions, a content recommendation, which for the customer, which ignores, right? And that those are like at the low stake. But if you look at high autonomy, which is like, credit denial or medical triage decision or legal assessment, these are all high stakes, right? Where human must be in the loop to make the decision and always review that before it goes out. So always, that's not just a, philosophical position. That's just practically a risk management that I can say, right? And that's where what I consider the most underrated responsibility is the product leader as the concise of the system, right? Not just the champion of that system. That means being willing to slow the roadmap when ethical questions aren't really answered properly. It means saying no to a use case when the business wants, but that creates a lot of risk you can't stand behind, right? And that takes the real courage, especially when there is a commercial pressure that you have on your head. Right. So the leaders who will define this kind of decade of AI are not the one who ship that fast product, but they are the one who ship the most responsible product. And the two things are not contradictory if what people think about it, because trust is once broken with the customer is expensive to is expensive to rebuild, right? So build it right at the first time is actually the fastest path ever that you can have.
Interesting take, Hemang. So now that you have spoken about product management and product leaders a bit, and we have also dealt with AI becoming more autonomous. The next question is, with the rise of agentic and autonomous systems, now how do you see the role of product management evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, when I started in product management, um, there was a lot of misconception, right? There's that product managers have enough engineering knowledge, which is too dangerous, and then enough designs where they have a lot of opinions, or enough business knowledge and all of that. But the product management itself is a role which is essential for all this coordination across the board, right? And what's happening with agentic AI is different from everything that came before. And I want to be specific about here what agentic means, because we have seen generative AI, where you just prompt something and you get the response in back, and then we move to agentic AI. So agentic AI doesn't just answer the question; it actually takes the sequence of actions autonomously and browsing the web, running the code, sending the communication, calling the different APIs. It is connecting with different MCP tools to your other system, making decisions across multiple steps. That's what happening in the agentic AI world, right? So without requiring human approval in each of these steps, that is the fundamental or new kind of a system. It changes the product management job in a way that I don't think industry has fully grappled yet on that. So let me walk through, like, what are the shift that I personally think which will happen in the product management world. Is one of the shift that I can say is feature definition that all the managers are used to, but now it will shift on to the outcome definition. So today product managers are largely define what a system does, right? Step by step process, screen by screen guidance. But with agentic AI, it is going to change. You increasingly define what success look like instead of just defining the feature, like agent determination. So it's is it like having its own path to get there? That requires a complete different kind of thinking. So you're no longer guiding every move of the way to launch the features, but you are coaching towards a result. That means getting much more precise about what you define and what is bound to your result or outcome, right? That's the biggest shift that I see in the thought process, I would say. The second shift I see is agent experience design, where most product design today is about human experience, how the person navigating on the interface of and in agentic world, you are also designing for non-human actors, right? Where what is the agent allowed to do? What is that not allowed to do? How does it behave when it is going to hit the ambiguous situation where it should be handled properly? What does it escalate versus something that it decides on their own? So these are the genuinely new design when we are designing the any agent to perform within our ecosystem. So most product teams don't have that framework today, within that team, and everybody is learning or evolving, right? So building those framework is going to change in upcoming years, in next, I would say, a year up to 3 to 5 years, right? That's the biggest shift I see in the product management. And the another shift that I see is how we think about the product failure. So traditionally, when we were building, any product feature, it is very predictable, right? You see experience or the UI, or maybe a broken link, right? Or maybe there is a failed API or a UI and an element which is not proper. So that can be very easily predictable. But in agentic failure, if I talk about, it's very different than that, right? They cascade. They can produce output that are technically correct, but sometimes contextually it's completely wrong. So they can fall in a way that are very difficult to produce. So product managers in this world will need to think about what are those failures look like, right? And the way engineer think about safety critical system. Similarly, with explicit failure model analysis is what product managers has to think about. And the product managers of next decade is less coordinator, but more a strategic system thinker, I would say, and someone who can hold the vision of what the AI should accomplish, design the boundaries, have the guardrails, and it should operate within, right? And ensure the whole system serve the human needs or the outcome that we are looking for. So in that way, that is not going to make the product manager's role smaller, but even more bigger with more responsibilities.
Thank you, Hemang. Hemang, we know today, and there is no doubt how data has a massive impact on decision making. Uh, Today, product leaders, business managers depend a lot on data to make business strategies, plans, and decisions. But then, very often, this data is incomplete. Now, how can product leaders make very confident decisions and drive outcomes in such environments where data is incomplete and fragmented?
Yeah, this is such a real problem, right, in the industry. And I have seen many organizations where the data is not completely 100% clean or perfect or not complete handy, right? But data is always, you can expect it is going to be a messier even though you clean it because of the day-to-day operation that is going on, right? So that's not a real expectation, but that is also an important factor to clean it as you go further and try to solve that with the technology. So that's not just a technology problem, right? That's really how the business operate on day-to-day basis, how different departments are working with the data and making sure those data are in the right format or or a clean way that it should be. And let me tell you about a moment early in my career that I came across, since you asked me, right? So I was a product manager at this same company where I was working for an e-commerce company only, and our checkout flow was losing some customer at particular step. So we had a data from three different systems that I have received from our analytics team, and then all this the three dashboard were showing three different numbers for the same metric that I was looking for. So my instinct was, let's wait and reconcile this data. So I requested team to reconcile so I can have one consolidate data to look at as a one source of truth, right? But when I was doing all of that, one of the my mentor at the times, he came up and said, right, like perfect data is a destination, not like starting point. So stop looking at the numbers everyone agrees on, because that's really difficult. So instead we have to start looking at directional direction that everyone should agree upon. And that was the mindset that I had changed at the times, and I learned that, right? So the first principle that I give all the product leaders who are looking this podcast is look for the convergence, not the perfection, right? If your qualitative user research, your quantitative analytics, or your customer support data, voice of consumer, all pointing at the same problem, and that's your right signal, rather than just looking at a number which is identical. So you just need a directional alignment from all the cross-functional stakeholder that you have, or the leadership team, rather than relying on the perfect data to move forward. And second, build your instinction muscle along with the data on the side, right? Data tells you what happened, but your instinct should be, it's built on years of pattern recognition from the customer behavior that tells you why and when to do next, what to do next, basically, right? So great product leaders, I would say, don't outsource their judgment just on looking at the data or the dashboard, but they use the data to calibrate their right judgment to move forward, and learn to work with proxy metrics. If you can't measure what you truly care about, measure what you think closest to you, or what you have handy. So if you can't measure like customer happiness directly, measure support ticket, for an example, that you're getting from the customer. There are refund rate that you can look at. There are repeat purchases from the customer behavior that we can look at. So these are the metrics to look at, and the data may not be perfect, but they are honest data, or a directional signal that you can consider with the world of massive data, and then that's how you should move forward. But the most dangerous thing here is product leaders who perform certainty that they don't have in this environment, right? Because oftentimes I have seen a lot of people get afraid of looking unsure in the room while talking about this. But what creates is a culture where no one challenges the assumption that you are taking. So, and unchallenged assumption in the product management world are like slow leaks of the water leakage in the pipe, right? Until everything floods, then everybody will notice. So instead, if, you just have to take your steps very carefully. So massive data is just your reality of your job. The skill is not waiting for the perfection, but the skill is to make the best decision that you can take with what you have in hand. So designing your process so you learn fast what goes wrong on your way.
Thank you so much, Hemang. Hemang, a lot of the viewers watching this interaction would be aspiring to be join the consumer electronics sector. Now, it would be very, very helpful to them if they know about the challenges of working in the sector. So, according to you, what are some of the major challenges of working in this sector that young leaders should be concerned about? They should be aware about.
Yeah, I would say, working in this sector is really glamorous. You see, different big launches, innovation, and etc. But the most fundamental challenge is what I call is the leverage trap that you come across, right? A feature that commands a premium price point today is table stack within like, a few months. And the gap between that is high-end devices and mid-range devices are narrowing down in almost every category of products that you work with, right? And that's an immense strategic shift that I see. And the challenge it creates is an organization or a cultural one. So the most, if I talk about a consumer electronic companies that grew up being exceptional at hardware, but they are still in the process of learning how to be software centric and a platform ready company, right? So the cadence is different. So hardware has a long development cycle. On the other hand, software wants to ship weekly to sell those products. So the talent for both sides is completely different if you look at. So the business model is different, but running both rhythm simultaneously, I would say, inside the same organization is one of the hardest leadership challenge that I have ever seen in an industry. So and the challenge specific to young leaders, if I can address that, is pressure around AI integration, right? So every product in consumer now needs an AI narrative to be created. So the risk is that teams add AI as a marketing layer rather than building the AI that creates genuine value for the customer. And there is a meaningful difference between product that says powered by AI and a product that actually brings value for the customer, which is measurable, right? Which is better to understand and serve the purpose in a different way. So that's a leadership quality that will separate the great product leaders from the one that just follow the trend, just having AI as a cool technology and build something. Rather, look at the business problem and then think about how you can solve those business challenges or problems by using the AI as a technology.
Thank you so much, Hemang. Hemang, so many MBA students, as you know, they dream of careers in consulting, finance, technology. Now, which of these industries do you believe will offer the fastest growth opportunities in the next decade?
I love these questions And I want to give you an honest answer about that, right? Because there are different industries that every MBA graduates, or not MBA graduates, it could be, any graduates who want to make a career in the different space, right? So let me start first with the consulting that you have mentioned. The case for consulting is really strong, right? I think it actually being reinforced by the AI rather than undermined by AI. So the exposure that in a consulting career is what people get is you work across different industry, different company sizes. The problem that you come across is compressed on the period of time, and you develop the pattern recognition over all of this, which take years to accumulate, right? So you actually build a network that opens up the door throughout your career. But here is the thing that that is very challenging. The clients have become far less willing to pay for a framework or a ready-made solution. They want more outcome now with AI technology, right? So the consulting firm that will dominate the next decade are the one that be who are using AI to deliver insight at a fraction of traditional cost. So that's very important, and that's the new learning I think people will have if you are looking to make your career in consulting. And also deploying experienced human judgment on top of what you are building with AI. So that's also one of the factor that you will learn a lot. Not just knowing what AI can do, but also knowing how you can apply a real business problem to it. And if I take finance sector, right, I am drawing a distinction, and I want to distinct like finance into two. Is like one is a finance and a finance analyst, and the wealth management side of things, right? So the traditional finance and the newer intersection of finance and the technology is at a genuinely exciting inflection point. So AI is not just replacing the financial analysis by itself, but it's amplifying the whole analyst who knows how to use it, right? Like for example, credit risk modeling or algorithm based portfolio management or a fraud detection, personalized financial planning. These are the area where AI capabilities creates real competitive moats, right? If you love finance and if you are willing to build quantitative and data fluency alongside your financial expertise, I would say the opportunity are significant and really growing fast. Where I see more disruption risk is in traditional relationship heavy roles that have been insulated from technology for a long time. And I just throw some light on the technical side or a product management side who wants to make a career. So specifically into product management or tech, which is go hand in hand as well. So AI product management, if I talk about, right, the broader work of building this digital product, this is where I see uh, the most durable opportunity over the next decade. And the reason is because every company in every industry is becoming a technology centric, right? If you see healthcare companies, they are becoming health tech companies. If you see a banking sectors, they are becoming like fintech now. If you see retailers, they are e-commerce friendly and data heavy companies. So that the demand for people who can translate between business needs and technology capabilities, who can be in the room with intersection of engineering and the business leaders, make both the conversation productive, and that demand is significantly outspacing the supply. And unlike consulting, where much of the leverage come from relation building or finance, and where leverage comes from capital access, tech rewards the same output, right? That creates opportunity for talent regardless of what your background is or a network is. So now, and this is a part I feel most strongly about. The faster career growth in the next decade won't come from picking the right industry that you are looking for at the after graduation, right? It will come from sitting at the intersection of two or more of those worlds that I have mentioned, and the consultant who genuinely understand how to build AI products, the finance professional, I would say, who can design algorithm based system, the technology leader who understand how capital market works, right? People who can operate fluently across disciplines are extraordinarily rare, and they are the one who will be in the most demand, I would say, as the world gets more complex and more interconnected, right? So industry will shift. And I have one final thing to say to all MBA students is sitting with the decision, and it's the most important thing is don't optimize for industry, optimize for the problem. So find the type of the problem that you are genuinely care about, genuinely, what excites you, that you want to solve, and you can dig deeper into it and think harder, then go become, excellent at solving those problems. Then the growth will follow your excellence, right? It follows the genuine curiosity. It follows the people who shows up not just, advance in their career, but to actually get better at something that matters a lot. So industry will shift, I would say. Job title will also change, but AI will redraw many of these lines. And what will remain constant is the value that it brings of someone who can think very clearly, who work across these boundaries and deliver the real outcome for the industry, right? So build that, and the growth takes care of itself. So that's the advice I would like to give to all of you.
Thank you so much, Hemang. I mean, that was indeed a very, very, very solid suggestion for the MBA students out there that, rather than looking at the industry, look out for the problems, look out from the real problems, how you approach the problems and how you bring value and solve the problems. So that is where, the success mantra lies about, is all about. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thank you so much for providing those valuable suggestions. And I'm very sure that we can stay in touch and we can again have you in any of our future interactions. Thank you so much, Hemang.
Thank you so much, Abhishek, and thank you for inviting me on this valuable podcast and all my, today's, point of view. I hope that is helpful for all the audience, and I'm looking forward for more conversation in future and stay in touch.
Of course, we would love to have you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of Manager's Mantra. Thank you, Hemang, for sharing your insights and providing career suggestions for management students. Be Smart viewers, we hope you found this conversation helpful and share your thought with us at bsmart.edit@bsmail.in. Follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for more such insightful and inspiring content. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.